Federal Drive is presented by GEHA, Government Employees Health Association, proudly providing health and dental benefits to federal employees and their families. Visit GEHA.com.
Behind the scenes on Capitol Hill, concerns about personal safety, logistics, and family well-being shape how members and staff experience the job day to day. We'll take a practical look at how those very human factors affect focus, capacity, and the ability to do sustained legislative work. Danielle Stewart from the POPVOX Foundation joins me. Danielle, it's great to have you. Welcome back to the show.
Thanks so much for having me, Terry.
You recently testified before Congress on initiatives to help future-proof Congress. Before we get into the future, though, I want to look at where Congress actually operates today. And from your vantage point, where does Congress most visibly struggle to keep up with the pace and the complexity of the work it's expected to do?
Yeah, that's a great question, Terry. So in the public testimony that I submitted to the House Appropriations Committee, I focused on three main pillars. My colleagues also submitted testimony focused on tech in Congress, which is a huge piece of what POPVOX Foundation works on. It's ensuring that legislatures and the legislative branch here in the United States are able to keep pace with the rapid growth of technology. And so what that means is making sure that Congress has the tools available to operate at an efficient and effective level, making sure that they are able to utilize the best and the brightest to make sure that they are serving the American people effectively and they are keeping pace with the private sector and what other companies and the American people are using in their daily lives. And so from the foundation standpoint, that means a lot of AI adoption and deployment. That also means making sure that they are adequately supporting their workforce to make sure that members and staff have the best tools and the best support within the legislative branch to do their jobs effectively and efficiently. And so our testimony focused on constituent services, tech, which I mentioned, and then my testimony focused on the buckets that we like to call the life in Congress piece. And so that's focused on, like I said, workforce, safety, and modernization within the halls of Congress.
It's a really complex suite of challenges facing the legislative branch. You use the term future-proofing to describe this suite of concerns. Who in the legislative branch is responsible for taking these up and thinking long-term to build new structures that really do help Congress address these in the future?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. I think that in terms of a leadership perspective, this is something that should be important to everybody that's working in the legislative branch. It should be important to the staff and the members, should be important to the chief administrative officer, to House leadership, Senate leadership, Senate Sergeant at Arms on the Senate side. And this is something that, we've seen over the last 7 or 8 years since the start of the Select Committee on the Modernization of Congress in the 116th Congress, which was a bipartisan effort. I was a staffer on that committee. This is something that members can care about and implement in their own offices. This is something that staff can talk about and talk to their bosses about. We've talked to so many offices who are working on doing AI training on their own, working on putting together different requirements and tools and handbooks and making sure that it's part of their review system, that they are adopting these tools and utilizing this technology in their workflow. That's a management requirement. And that's something that, like I said, comes from the top. And that's incredibly important. So I think that this is a branch-wide effort, and it should continue to be that way.
I'm speaking with Danielle Stewart. She's advisor for congressional initiatives at the POPVOX Foundation. Danielle, let's drill into your testimony, specifically those life in Congress issues. You point to two really important personal concerns. One is security, and one is family support. Tell us more about those, what you're hearing.
Yeah, so these requests come from speaking with congressional staff and members on what their needs are and where they see improvements can be made within the legislative branch. And a lot of this also comes from my personal experience as a longtime Hill staffer. So from the security perspective, members and their staff are facing an increasingly complex threat environment. The DC offices in Washington, DC, it's a congressional campus. Everyone's housed in, a number of just a couple of buildings. Everyone goes through security to go into those buildings. There's a robust Capitol Police presence, and you feel pretty contained within those buildings. At the district level, district offices do not have that they're not at parity in terms of the security levels. Some district offices are in federal buildings. Some district offices are in strip malls. And so the security on the difference in security for those offices can be very stark. And as someone who has set up freshman member offices before, there is a huge gap and a huge need, especially in those first couple of months when you're hiring staff, you're trying to get your office set up. You may not have a phone line set up, depending on if you moved into a new office space where there wasn't an existing tenant. You might not have Wi-Fi. You certainly don't have panic buttons set up if someone were to come into the office. And so there's a huge disparity in what is provided and really what is needed for these members and their staff at the district level. And in DC, the majority of folks who are answering the phones in DC offices and congressional offices are front office staff and interns. And same with folks when they're coming in and out of the office. The first person you're going to see when you walk into a congressional office is a staff assistant or an intern usually. There is currently no comprehensive security training that is required for congressional staff. There is cybersecurity training and there's ethics training, both are which incredibly important and they should continue happening. But there's no training on how to handle folks who might come into the office and seem threatening or who actually threaten you in person. There's no training on how to handle a protest. There's no training on how to handle a phone call if someone calls and threatens you or your boss or says, I know where the member is going to be tomorrow. Outside of a handbook, which you can certainly consult Capitol Police and consult House leadership and other members of Congress, there's no standardized training requirement. And so talking with members and talking with staff, this is a huge need. And this is something that I think, especially for front office staff, equipping staff and members and interns, especially with the tools they need to make sure that they feel safe at work, know how to handle an intense situation, know how to de-escalate if someone comes into the office and is unruly or is being threatening or disruptive. These are really important tools that the House should be providing, and the Senate as well, that Congress in general should be providing its members and its staff.
And what about the concerns of family orientation?
Yeah, so this is something that came directly from member offices who were newly elected members. And like I said, this is having set up a couple of freshman offices. I've seen this firsthand. The first week in Congress is so exciting, especially that swearing in day. A lot of offices will have open houses, and so they'll have supportive constituents, families, friends come to DC, come to see their new office, come to watch the swearing in from the office on the floor. It's so exciting. This is something that members and their families and their networks have worked so hard to be able to accomplish, to be able to come to DC and support their communities. But there's currently nothing in place for the families and the children of those members who are starting out on this new life event, right? A lot of these members are traveling very long distances weekly. They are away from their families. The trend to move your families to Washington, D.C. to live here while you're in session has changed dramatically over the last 30 years. And so most members keep their families at home in the district. And so that means long nights, long weeks away from your family. And especially for families with young children, that's a huge change to have a mom or a dad gone when you're used to having them home. And so being able to have something specific for the families during those first couple of days, during that swearing in day specifically, that is really welcoming, that gives them an opportunity to meet other families, for spouses to go somewhere where there's a helpful couple of booths where they can speak with members of the Capitol Police, the kids can meet the police officers so they don't feel as intimidated coming to DC and going through security. They can talk to people from the Library of Congress and learn about some of the cool resources that the library has and things that the kids can look forward to doing when they come to visit their parents. One of the things that I did in my first year with POPVOX Foundation was put together a children's book for children of members of Congress. It's called Welcome to Washington. We dropped it off at freshman member offices for that swearing in day at the start of this current Congress. It's got fun facts about DC. It's got a scavenger hunt in the Capitol, and it's got like a fun autograph page so kids can look forward to meeting other members or meeting folks here in DC that they're excited about. Just making sure that members and their families are welcomed and that they have resources to feel supported here. I think this year especially, we've seen a record number of retirements in the House specifically. And I think family structure and family needs really play into that. So making sure that when families start this new chapter, there are resources for the whole family and not just for the member in their job.
Danielle, I don't want to brush by those. Those are really significant issues, and not addressing them can really have an impact on a member's effectiveness if they're distracted by security concerns or distracted about their family's safety or integration. They may not bring their full mental focus to the job. What are you hearing from Congress in terms of taking on these issues and thinking about addressing them?
Yeah. So, in the last year, especially following a lot of violence last summer against elected officials at the state level too, not just at the federal level, there's been some big changes on the security front in terms of the funding that's available for members and what they can use their representational allowance, which is the money that they're able to use for their congressional office for expenses and salaries, what they're able to use that money for. And so that was a huge improvement in letting them use that money for personal security at events. There's currently a residential security program that exists. There's a certain amount of money that members are allotted. They can work with the House Sergeant at Arms, local police and Capitol Police to install security measures at their homes. This is a wonderful program, but as of maybe last summer, I think only a little over 150 folks had really taken advantage of it. And so there's a huge discrepancy in terms of what's available and making sure that members are actually taking advantage of these security measures to keep them and their families safe, and their staff too.
Why is this the right time to be thinking about these initiatives in terms of future-proofing Congress?
I think it's always the right time to be thinking about these things. I think that making sure, especially as we are heading into campaign year, there will be a new batch of members coming in January. A lot of these members will be probably much tech savvier than Congress has passed, given the fact that campaigns are using a lot of these tools like AI in their daily workflow, and a lot of members may not be. And so making sure that these improvements are being made year over year to welcome a new batch of members, to start the legislative branch and the Congress off on the right foot, and to prioritize modernization. Modernization and innovation is not a one and done situation. It is something that is ongoing and needs to be prioritized. And like I said, this is not just a top down priority, something that only leadership or the CAO can be working on. It's certainly critical that they are prioritizing it, but members and staff also have the capability to care about these things and to implement them in their daily offices.
I've been speaking with Danielle Stewart. She's advisor for congressional initiatives at the POPVOX Foundation. Danielle, thanks so much for joining me.
Thanks, Terry.
We'll post this interview at federalnewsnetwork.com/Federal Drive. Subscribe to the Federal Drive wherever you get your podcasts.